The hum of the projector filled the boardroom a sterile rhythm beneath the tension that had already curdled the air. The skyline of Atlanta glared through the glass walls, its late morning light slicing across the polished table, where 12 people sat, people who owed their careers, their paychecks, their breakthroughs to me. And yet none of them met my eyes. Diane Caldwell Pierce stood at the head of the table, immaculate in her navy suit, her posture radiating the authority of someone who had never been told no. 62 sharp as broken glass and as cold as the marble floors beneath her heels. Her voice cut through the silence. This company needs direction, Natalie. Real direction. Not pet projects driven by emotion. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my expression steady. Pet projects, I asked. You mean the biosurgical robotics program that just secured FDA pre-approval? Her smile was thin, practiced. We're grateful for your passion, truly. But Pierce Medical is entering a new chapter. We need leadership that understands corporate scale, not just lab experiments. My husband Jonathan sat beside her shoulders, tense beneath his tailored suit. He opened his mouth maybe to defend me, but Diane's manicured hand lifted, silencing him. No, Jonathan. This isn't personal. It's business. You of all people should understand that. Her gaze returned to me, unwavering, her tone suddenly sweet. You'll, of course, be compensated generously. HR has prepared a transition package. You can review it today. I scanned the table. Every board member avoided my eyes. Dr. Lee, who once told me my research saved his career. Marcus from finance, who used my prototype presentation to get his promotion. All of them looked down at their notes like obedient school children. My pulse drummed in my ears. So let me understand, I said slowly, the tremor in my fingers betraying none of the storm building inside me. You're removing me from the company I co-founded, without cause. Diane's voice was a scalpel. You'll still hold equity, Natalie, but operational control will shift to someone with more business experience. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the far end of the table. Victoria Hale, young, crisp, confident in that smug, performative way. The new director of R&D, Diane's protégé. Her lips curved into a soft, almost pitying smile as she said, Don't worry, I'll take care of your projects. The word, you're landed like a knife. My throat burned, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Diane pressed a pen toward me, the severance packet sliding across the glass like a declaration of war. You can sign today or have your attorney review it. Either way, I expect your office cleared by end of day. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we can discuss this more privately? Jonathan, Diane snapped, this is a board decision. The vote was unanimous. My hands rested on the table, palms down, grounding myself. The woman across from me, my husband's mother, my company's CEO, was stripping away years of work with the same calm she might use to order lunch. I met her eyes. You're making a mistake. She tilted her head slightly. Perhaps, but it's my company's mistake to make. I almost laughed. My company. She had no idea. The patents, the intellectual property, the engineering blueprints, every key piece of innovation that had built Pierce Medical's empire still bore my name. Legally, quietly, permanently. But I said nothing. Not yet. I'll have my attorney review this, I said evenly, sliding the packet toward me. Diane nodded, smug in her victory. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. Her voice softened, but the cruelty beneath it gleamed like metal. Just remember, this is business, not personal. I stood gathering the papers. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint tick of her diamond bracelet as she crossed her arms. I looked once around the table at the colleagues who wouldn't meet my eyes, at the woman who thought she'd erased me, and felt something inside me harden. They thought they were ending me. They were only rewriting the beginning. As I reached the door, Victoria's voice followed, syrupy and smug. Good luck, Natalie. You'll need it. I paused just long enough to glance over my shoulder. Luck, I said quietly, is for people who don't understand preparation. Then I walked out, the echo of my heels the only sound left in a room full of cowards. Outside the hallway, lights burned bright and cold. My reflection in the glass showed a woman stripped of everything but resolve. Diane thought she'd won. She'd just declared war on the one person who knew every blueprint, every weakness, and every secret clause she'd ever signed. The elevator ride down felt endless. The mirrored walls reflecting a version of me I didn't recognize, hair too neat, face too calm, eyes too still. Outside, the sun baked the glass towers of downtown Atlanta, but inside I felt cold. The kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads quiet and numbing. When I reached my office, the security tag reader blinked red. Access denied. They hadn't even waited until the end of the day. A young man from IT was packing up my workstation, avoiding eye contact. "Ms. Pierce, HR said you'd want your personal items boxed. I'll, leave these by the door." His voice trembled guilt woven through every syllable. "Thank you." I managed, though the word felt foreign. I stepped inside. My desk was bare except for a single cardboard box containing a photo of my old lab team, a plant I'd kept alive longer than most marriages, and the small metallic prototype of the first robotic arm we'd ever built. The one that started it all. My phone buzzed. Jonathan's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Nat, listen," he began, voice low, soothing the same tone he used when placating investors. "Mom's under pressure. The board's been restless since the IPO talks started. She thinks I'm a liability." I interrupted. "She thinks I don't fit her image of a Pierce executive." Silence. Then weakly, "She just wants what's best for the company." I laughed short and bitter. "And you?" He hesitated too long. "I think maybe taking a step back could be good for you. You've been exhausted. Maybe you can recalibrate." Rest. The word stung worse than any insult. I had built this company from scratch, poured my health, my time, my marriage into its bones. And now I was supposed to rest. I looked around my office, every surface wiped of my existence, every trace of me being deleted in real time. On the company intranet, my name had already been removed from the leadership page. My biography was gone. My work archived under legacy projects. They had turned me into a footnote before I'd even left the building. My phone pinged again an email from HR. "Subject exit process. Please ensure all company materials remain on premises. Your final paycheck and severance documents will be sent to your home address. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Somewhere beneath the humiliation was a spark, small, sharp, dangerous. They were erasing me, but I had built everything they stood on. Every patent, every device, every algorithm in their so-called innovation pipeline had my fingerprints embedded deep inside. I opened the last drawer of my desk. Inside was a slim USB drive, its label faded but unmistakable R-Series original schematics. My heart steadied. Not yet, I thought. Not until they've hung themselves with their own arrogance. I placed the USB in my coat pocket and closed the drawer gently. Before leaving, I turned once more toward the window, watching the city hum, below people crossing streets, cabs honking the endless churn of ambition. I used to love that rhythm. Now, it felt like noise. I took the small prototype from my desk, the robot arm's steel joints cool against my fingers. I whispered almost to myself, "She thinks she won." The words floated into the empty room, quiet but solid. At the doorway, I paused as two junior engineers passed whispering. When they noticed me, their conversation died instantly. One offered a faint nod, the kind you give to someone attending her own funeral. "Good luck, Dr. Pierce," he murmured. I smiled, but my eyes stayed cold. "Luck," I said softly, "is for people who didn't build their own future." Then I stepped out, leaving the office, the silence, and the wreckage behind. Behind me, the automatic door clicked shut, sealing away 7 years of my life. Ahead, only quiet determination. The memory came back to me in fragments that night when sleep refused to come. The whir of lab machines, the taste of burnt coffee, the echo of laughter in a garage that smelled of solder and hope. 7 years earlier, before the sleek towers and boardroom betrayals, Pierce Medical Systems had been nothing more than an idea scribbled on a napkin. I was 29, fresh out of Stanford with a PhD in biomedical engineering and a stubborn belief that technology could rebuild what the human body lost. Jonathan Pierce had been a visiting lecturer at a medical innovation symposium in San Francisco. He wasn't brilliant, not in the technical sense, but he had charm, the kind that drew investors like moths. I was all substance, he was all presentation. Together, we made something that worked. We spent nights in a rented warehouse, the air thick with heat and exhaustion. I soldered circuit boards until my fingers blistered. Jonathan made calls pitched to anyone who'd listen. And when we landed our first investor, his mother, Diane Caldwell Pierce, showed up in pearls and power. Family money should stay in the family, she had said, signing the check. Back then, I thought she was saving us. I didn't know she was buying me. Diane was a force even then. Elegant, assertive, unbothered by boundaries. She turned our humble startup into a formal corporation within a year. Structure, she called it. Protection. I didn't argue. I was too busy building the product that would change everything, a robotic arm capable of performing microvascular surgery with near-perfect precision. The R series, my design, my invention. Diane's control grew alongside our success. First, she installed her legal team to protect the company. Then she insisted all patents be centralized under corporate licensing. I trusted her. I believed family meant safety. When Jonathan proposed in the middle of our cluttered lab surrounded by cables and schematics, I said yes because I thought love meant loyalty. He slipped a ring on my finger with hands that smelled like copper and promise. For a while it worked. The company flourished. The medical community called our product the future of microsurgery. Diane's name appeared in every headline. Mine appeared in the footnotes: lead engineer, co-founder, project director, never creator. I didn't mind at first. Recognition wasn't why I built things. But then the lines blurred. Diane started rewriting history in real time. She gave interviews describing how she conceptualized the R series. She described me as a talented young developer under her mentorship. When I protested, Jonathan said, "She's just old-fashioned. Let her have the spotlight." I let it go because I loved him, because I believed he'd protect me. Then came the contracts. The first time Diane asked me to sign a standard licensing agreement, I barely read it. The second time I did. It included a clause one I'd quietly altered before signing. Instead of assigning patent ownership, I granted exclusive corporate license with a renewal term requiring my written consent. I remember Diane's assistant handing me the final copy and saying, "You're a lifesaver, Dr. Pierce." I was, just not for her. As the company grew, I faded into the background. My title changed from Chief Technical Officer to Head of Development. Then, during the year Jonathan became Chief Strategy Officer, I found myself excluded from executive meetings altogether. My office was moved 2 floors down, closer to the labs. "It's more your environment," Diane had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The pattern was clear, but I ignored it, because I wanted peace. Because I thought my work spoke for itself. I see now what a fool that made me. The flashback ended where the nightmare began, a fundraising gala 2 years ago. Diane in silver silk, Jonathan at her side, reporters crowding the red carpet. When one asked who designed the R series, Diane smiled for the cameras and said, "Our company's innovation is a team effort. We all build together." I had stood just a few feet away, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like metal. That night alone in my lab, I whispered the truth into the hum of the machines. "No, Diane. You didn't build it. I did." The memory burned like a warning one I had ignored until now. And as I lay awake in the dark, I realized she had stolen my spotlight once. She wouldn't steal my legacy again. The next morning, I returned to the building out of habit more than purpose. Old instincts die hard. The lobby receptionist froze when she saw me. "Dr. Pierce, you're not on the access list anymore." Her tone was careful, almost apologetic. I smiled faintly. "That's all right. I just need to collect something from my office." She hesitated, then waved me through when the security guard looked away. The elevator ride felt different now, stripped of belonging. When the doors opened, I froze. My office door bore a new nameplate, Victoria Hale, Director of Research and Development. My stomach knotted. Through the glass wall, I could see her perfect hair, crisp blouse pretending to belong there. She was standing where I used to stand in front of my prototypes, giving orders to 2 junior engineers who once reported to me. I lingered by the doorway just out of sight, watching her run her manicured fingers over my designs. "Diane wants these rebranded," she said, voice sweet but firm. "Remove Dr. Pierce's name from all internal documentation. By the end of the week, we'll file updated patent references under the corporate portfolio." One of the engineers shifted uneasily. Those were filed as individual contributions." Legal said. "Legal works for Diane." Victoria interrupted her tone, slicing the air. "And so do you." Her smile returned glossy and poisonous. I felt the heat rise in my throat. They weren't just pushing me out, they were rewriting history. I stepped closer to the doorway, and one of the assistants spotted me, eyes widening. Dr. Pierce. Victoria turned startled for a split second before recovering her composure. "Oh," she said, pretending surprise. "I didn't realize you'd still be here. We were just tidying up." "Tidying," I repeated softly, letting the word hang between us. My gaze fell to the prototype on her desk, my R-Series arm stripped of my nameplate labeled corporate property. The sight made my pulse slow, cold, and deliberate. "You might want to be careful," I said. "These designs are more intricate than they look. One wrong calibration and you'll burn through a $1 million processor in 5 seconds. Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, don't worry, Dr. Pierce. We have everything under control now." "Now." The word landed like a shove. She moved toward me, her perfume sharp, her tone condescending. "You know Diane really admires your creativity. But creativity without discipline." She trailed off, eyes glinting. "It's dangerous in business." I leaned in, slightly lowering my voice. "And arrogance without understanding is lethal." Her smile flickered just briefly. Then she laughed, light and empty. "You sound like my mother," she said. "Always dramatic." She turned away, dismissing me, already calling someone on her headset. "Legal, it's Victoria. I need those updated patent filings sent to Diane's office today." That was all I needed to hear. I turned and walked out before the rage could betray my calm. My heels clicked against the marble floor like the ticking of a countdown clock. In the corridor, I stopped to steady my breath. At the end of the hall, one of the engineers, Ethan, hurried up to me. He was young, barely 30, still naive enough to believe loyalty mattered. "Dr. Pierce," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "You didn't hear this from me, but they've already changed your name on the internal records. The patents, the prototypes, everything. It's like you were never here." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I nodded, calm and deliberate. "Thank you, Ethan. That's all I needed to know." I walked toward the exit, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My reflection in the glass doors looked older, sharper. That was the moment it stopped being about revenge or pride. It became about truth, about reclaiming what was mine, not just the work, but the respect that came with it. Behind me, Victoria's laughter drifted down the hall, bright and careless. I let it burn into memory, because one day soon that laugh would echo in a courtroom instead. That evening, my apartment felt smaller than usual. The city outside buzzed with the noise of life moving forward, but inside, everything was still. I'd traded my corner office for a one-bedroom overlooking a half-lit skyline. The boxes from my old office sat unopened against the wall, silent witnesses to what I had lost. I poured a glass of wine not for comfort, but for clarity. The knock came at 8:47 p.m. I didn't need to check the peephole. Only one person knocked like he was afraid of his own decisions. "Jonathan," I said, opening the door. He looked different. Expensive suit, still perfect, but the confidence that used to coat his every word had cracked. He stepped inside, eyes darting across the apartment like he didn't belong here anymore. "You've been ignoring my calls," he said. "I needed space," I replied. "And time to remember which side you're on." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Nat, come on. Don't make this harder. Mom didn't mean—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. "She didn't mean to humiliate me or to erase me from my own company." He hesitated. "She's protecting the IPO. Investors are nervous. They think the company needs a unified front." "By eliminating the woman who built it?" I asked quietly. He looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "You know how she is," he muttered. "She doesn't trust anyone who isn't blood." I let out a humorless laugh. I am blood now, Jonathan. You married me, remember? Or was that another corporate decision? He flinched. That's not fair. Fair. I stepped closer, feeling the anger pulsing under my skin. I gave up research positions, grants, and 2 fellowships to build that company. I wrote the patents, led the prototypes, and signed every licensing deal. And you sat there today silent while your mother buried me alive in front of the board. He took a breath, voice low. If I had said something, it would have made things worse. You know how she reacts. I stared at him, disbelief settling like dust. You're afraid of her. He didn't answer. The silence was louder than any confession. You always were, I whispered. When it comes to her, you shrink. You're her perfect soldier. He looked wounded, defensive, but not angry. Just tired. She built this company's name, Nat. Without her, we wouldn't. Without me, you'd still be pitching ideas in a garage. I cut in. The truth hung heavy between us. I'm not your mother's mistake to clean up Jonathan. I'm her mirror, and she can't stand the reflection. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. I could see the words he wanted to say, the apology that never came when it mattered. Instead, he exhaled slowly. You're overreacting, he said finally. Take the severance. Start something new. Maybe this is a sign to let go. That did it. I felt something inside me click into place. Not rage, not grief, but resolve. You're right, I said softly. This is a sign. He blinked uncertain. A sign of what? That you both underestimated me. I stepped back, gesturing toward the door. You should go, Jonathan. I have work to do. He frowned, confused. Work? You don't even... Not for your mother, I interrupted. Not anymore. He lingered, as if waiting for me to say something that would make him stay. When I didn't, he nodded slowly, defeated. I'll check on you tomorrow, he said, though we both knew he wouldn't. After he left, I stood in the silence he'd left behind. The wine sat untouched, the city lights blinking like static. I walked to the window and whispered, You can't check on a storm, Jonathan. You just wait for it to hit. Long after midnight, the city had gone quiet except for the soft hum of traffic miles away. I sat at my small dining table laptop open, surrounded by documents I had saved over the years, contracts, licensing agreements, patent filings, all neatly organized in digital folders. I had always kept backups. It wasn't paranoia, it was precision. My father used to say, smart people don't prepare for disaster, they prevent it. He was right. Tonight, prevention became survival. I opened a file labeled R-Series Licensing Agreement, Final, and scrolled to the clause I had written 7 years ago. The words glowed like a lifeline in the darkness. Licensor retains full ownership of all intellectual property. License shall renew annually only upon written consent of the licensor. The licensor was me. I sat back, letting the realization settle. Diane thought she had cornered me, but she had built her empire on borrowed bricks mine. I remembered that meeting clearly the day the paperwork was signed. Diane had been impatient waving her pen. Natalie, this is standard language. Just sign it. I'd smiled, pretending to skim the pages while actually reading every line. I added a single phrase. She didn't notice a line that changed everything. She'd been so focused on controlling me that she never considered I might be protecting myself. Now that oversight was about to cost her everything. I plugged in an old external hard drive and copied every patent document, every research report, every signed email proving my authorship. They weren't just blueprints, they were evidence. At 2:00 a.m., I brewed fresh coffee, the bitter scent grounding me. The apartment lights cast long shadows across the floor, and for the first time since the board meeting, I felt calm, the kind of calm that comes when you realize you've been holding the ace all along. My phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan Mom says you're overreacting. Please don't do anything rash. We can fix this quietly. Quietly. I almost laughed. For years, my silence had been mistaken for weakness. That would end now. I typed a single response. Tell her I'll be in touch on legal terms. I saved the files to a new USB drive, labeling it R-Series Originals. Then I opened a locked drawer at the bottom of my filing cabinet. Inside were the signed prototypes of my patent disclosures notarized years earlier. Diane's signature appeared at the bottom of each, confirming the licensing terms. Ironically, her signature would be the evidence that destroyed her defense. I flipped through the papers, slowly tracing the ink like a surgeon tracing a scar. Every clause was deliberate, every detail meticulous. I wasn't just an inventor. I was an architect of both creation and consequence. The thought made me smile small but sharp. Still, a faint sadness lingered underneath. I hadn't built those protections because I expected betrayal. I built them because even then, a small part of me feared I wasn't truly safe in a company controlled by family politics. That fear had turned out to be foresight. I opened another folder labeled Investor Correspondence, scanning through Diane's recent communications. She had already promised investors that the R-Series line would anchor the IPO valuation technology she didn't legally own. If that became public, the company's stock would collapse overnight and she'd face securities fraud investigations. She had built her castle on sand, and I held the tide. By 3:30 a.m., my plan was forming with surgical precision. I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't threaten. I'd let Diane and her golden protege believe they had won, let them present my technology to the world as theirs. Then, when the cameras were rolling and the investors were watching, I would pull the ground out from under them. As I ejected the USB drive and locked it away in a small safe, my mind felt clear for the first time in months. They thought I was finished. They thought my silence meant surrender. But I had something Diane Caldwell-Pierce never understood. I didn't need to fight loud to win. I just needed to wait for gravity to do its work. By the next afternoon, I was sitting in the minimalist lobby of Harrison & Holt LLP, a law firm that specialized in intellectual property litigation. The receptionist offered me coffee, her tone polite but curious. People didn't come here for casual disputes. They came for wars disguised as contracts. A framed quote hung on the wall behind her. "Preparation is the quietest form of power." Fitting. A tall man in a dark suit appeared in the doorway. Dr. Pierce. His handshake was firm, measured. "Marcus Holt. I've read your case summary. Why don't you step into my office?" His workspace was orderly, every document aligned perfectly, as if precision was his religion. He gestured for me to sit. "You said you co-founded Pierce Medical Systems 7 years ago, and you retained ownership of your patents." "Correct." I handed him the folder I'd prepared: overnight printouts, licensing agreements, notarized originals, even the USB drive. "They're using my technology as the backbone of their IPO, without my consent." Marcus scanned the documents quickly, his sharp eyes flicking over clauses like a surgeon inspecting X-rays. "This is impressive," he murmured. "They've been using your work illegally for at least 3 years. You understand what this means?" "That I have leverage," I said. He looked up, studying me. "Leverage. You have dynamite. If Pierce Medical proceeds with the IPO under false ownership claims, that's securities fraud. We're not talking about a lawsuit. We're talking about federal investigation." I leaned back, letting the words settle. "Good," I said, "but we're not pulling the trigger yet." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "You want to wait?" "Yes," I replied. "They're arrogant. Diane Caldwell-Pierce believes she's untouchable. I want her to get comfortable to commit to every lie in writing to announce to the world that my invention is hers. And when she does, you detonate." Marcus finished a faint smile forming. "I can respect that." He flipped through a few more pages. "I'll need digital timestamps and confirmation that your patent licenses were never renewed." I nodded. "All here." I passed him another folder with server logs and notarized signatures. I kept copies of every annual renewal notice they failed to send. I may have trusted Diane once, but I never trusted the system she controlled. He laughed softly. "You're more prepared than most of my clients after 6 months of discovery." "I build things to survive," I said simply. "Even contracts." He leaned back in his chair, tapping the pen against his notebook. "Tell me what you want out of this Dr. Pierce." "Revenge money, restitution, recognition," I answered. "And justice." "Publicly." "Publicly," he repeated, intrigued. "So you're not interested in a settlement?" "Settlements are for people who want silence," I said. "I want truth." He nodded slowly, clearly impressed. "Then we'll play this carefully. You said they're preparing for an IPO. In 3 months, I confirmed. They'll hold a live press event to unveil the R series as their flagship product. That's when I want the world to see what happens when you build empires on stolen work. Marcus smiled, a flash of admiration behind his professional composure. This will make headlines, Natalie. You realize that. Good, I said. Diane loves headlines. He chuckled, then his tone softened. There's something I admire about your restraint. Most people in your position would be shouting from rooftops. Noise wastes energy, I said. Precision changes outcomes. He leaned forward. Then precision is what we'll give them. We spent the next 3 hours mapping the strategy like a blueprint. He'd file a preemptive copyright and patent ownership reaffirmation quietly but legally airtight. Then, on the day of this IPO, we'd send an open legal challenge to every major investor, journalist, and regulatory agency simultaneously. When the story breaks, Marcus said their stock will implode. The board will have no choice but to remove her. I exhaled slowly, imagining the scene. Diane in her flawless suit, her carefully rehearsed smile cracking under the lights. Let her think she's won, I murmured. Marcus looked at me curiously. You sound like someone who's been planning this for years. No, I said, standing. Just someone who stopped letting other people write her ending. When I left his office, the afternoon sun was brutal, bouncing off every glass building in sight. But the light didn't sting anymore. It felt like a mirror reflecting everything I had built and everything I was about to reclaim. Diane thought silence meant surrender. She was about to learn it meant strategy. 3 months later, Atlanta's skyline gleamed like polished steel under the summer sun. I stood inside Marcus Holt's office, eyes fixed on the live feed playing across the wall-mounted screen. At Pierce Medical Headquarters, banners with Diane Caldwell Pierce's name stretched across the stage, gold letters proclaiming Innovation for Humanity. It was their IPO launch day, the day she would unveil my technology to investors, analysts, and the press. The irony made my pulse steady. Showtime, Marcus said quietly, stepping beside me, his tablet ready. On the screen, Diane appeared, her silver hair gleaming under the lights, her voice smooth and practiced. Today marks a milestone, she announced. Pierce Medical is introducing the future of microsurgery, the R series. My invention. My name erased. She gestured to Victoria Hale, who stood smugly beside the device I had created. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the auditorium. Diane continued. Under Victoria's leadership, our research division has reached new heights. This technology will redefine what's possible in surgical precision. I almost laughed. Leadership. The word curdled in my chest. Victoria approached the microphone, radiant in the spotlight. It's an honor to build upon Dr. Pierce's foundation, she said with feigned humility. But every innovation must evolve. We've improved the design and performance to make it truly market-ready. Marcus scoffed. Improved? I shook my head, eyes still on the screen. Let them talk? Then came the question I'd been waiting for. Sarah Lynn, a senior journalist from the Wall Street Journal, raised her hand. Mrs. Caldwell Pierce, she said, her tone calm but cutting. Is it true that the patents for the R series remain registered under Dr. Natalie Pierce's personal ownership? The pause was electric. For a second, even Diane's flawless mask cracked. She recovered with a smile. Pierce Medical holds full rights through perpetual licensing agreements, Ms. Lynn. All intellectual property has been properly assigned. Marcus looked at me, eyebrow raised. Ready? I nodded once. Send it. He hit enter. The pre-drafted press release and legal challenge I had written 3 weeks earlier went live across every major business outlet within seconds. The headline flashed on my phone. Breaking Pierce Medical faces patent dispute. Co-founder files legal challenge over ownership of R-Series technology. Within moments, the notification alerts rippled through the audience on screen. I watched as heads turned, phones lit up, whispers spread like wildfire. Sarah Lynn's phone buzzed. She looked up sharply. Mrs. Caldwell Pierce, she said, interrupting Diane mid-sentence. Dr. Pierce's legal team has just issued a statement claiming that the company's license to her patents expired 2 months ago. Do you have a comment? The color drained from Diane's face. Victoria blinked rapidly, her confident smile faltering. Cameras zoomed in. The tension was palpable even through the screen. That's ridiculous. ridiculous, Diane stammered, forcing composure. We have ongoing agreements. Then you won't mind showing documentation, Sarah pressed. The audience murmured, investors shifting uncomfortably. Diane glanced toward the wings of the stage where Jonathan stood frozen. His eyes met hers, then flicked toward his phone. He had seen the statement too. Marcus grinned. Perfect timing. I could see the moment Diane realized she was trapped. Every lie she had built, every press interview, every investor assurance, all suddenly radioactive. The silence on stage stretched thin as wire. Well, Diane finally said, her tone brittle. We'll address these claims in due course. Pierce Medical remains confident in its intellectual property, but the damage was already done. As the live stream continued, the ticker at the bottom of the broadcast shifted Pierce Medical shares down 11% and falling. Marcus turned to me, impressed. You just detonated an empire with one email. I kept my gaze on the screen, watching Diane's practiced smile falter again. No, I said softly. I just reminded her who built it. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Jonathan stepped forward, whispering something to his mother. She waved him off, still trying to maintain her dignity. But behind her, Victoria looked terrified, glancing down at her tablet as though searching for proof that no longer existed. I folded my arms, the weight in my chest finally easing. For the first time in months, I felt seen not as a wife, not as a subordinate, but as the architect of the truth they had tried to bury. Let her finish the show, I said to Marcus. I want her to smile all the way through the fall. The phone rang exactly 47 minutes after the press conference imploded. Marcus didn't even have to look at the caller ID. She's calling, he said, sliding the phone toward me. Take it. I hesitated only a second before answering. Diane, what do you think you're doing? Her voice was sharp venom threaded through every syllable. In the background, I could hear chaos phones, ringing voices shouting the hum of panic inside a corporate ship taking on water. I'm protecting what's mine, I said evenly. You mean destroying everything, she snapped. You've humiliated this company. You've humiliated my family. Funny, I replied. I remember being humiliated first, in front of your board, in front of my husband, in front of the people who built their careers on my work. You don't understand the damage you've caused. Investors are panicking. Reporters are calling nonstop. You're ruining something you helped build. No, Diane, I said calmly. You're ruining something I built. I just stopped pretending it was yours. The silence that followed was pure rage. You'll regret this, she hissed. Do you really think one clever contract will save you? Our legal team will bury you in countersuits. We'll drag this through every court until you're bankrupt. Maybe I said. But discovery goes both ways, doesn't it? Every email, every falsified report, every time you presented my technology as your own, it'll all be public record. Are you ready for that? Her breath hitched. I could almost hear the calculation in her pause, the way predators hesitate when the prey bites back. What do you want? She finally demanded. Let's skip the theatrics. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I want an apology, I said. Public, not private. I want full credit restored for my patents and designs. I want your resignation letter on the board's desk by tomorrow morning, and I want a formal statement clearing my name of every whisper you've spread. Impossible, she spat. Then enjoy watching your company collapse under the weight of fraud investigations, I replied. The SEC loves a paper trail. You wouldn't dare. Already did, I interrupted. Marcus filed the complaint an hour ago. The silence that followed was exquisite. I pictured her standing in her office, perfectly manicured nails clutching the phone, realizing too late that she'd been outmaneuvered by the woman she had dismissed as an emotional scientist. You'll destroy Jonathan's career too, she said finally. Desperation creeping in. He's innocent in this. I almost laughed. He's a bystander, Diane, and bystanders always get caught in the debris. She tried another tactic, her voice softening. You loved this company once, Natalie. You loved my son. You don't have to burn everything down. I'm not burning it, I said quietly. I'm rebuilding it without the rot. Then I hung up. Marcus exhaled slowly. You just gutted her. I leaned back, closing my eyes. No, I gave her a choice. You think she'll take it? She'll try to fight first, I said. It's all she knows. He nodded. Then we'll be ready. Over the next 48 hours, chaos ruled Pierce Medical. Investors demanded meetings. The board called emergency sessions. Leaked internal emails, some sent anonymously, others forwarded by frightened employees, flooded the media. They exposed months of deceit, altered reports, manipulated patent filings, even bribes to secure favorable coverage. The walls of Diane's empire began to crack. Jonathan called me on the second night, his voice heavy with exhaustion. You could have come to me, he said. I would have helped. Would you? I asked. You didn't speak when she erased me. Why would you now? Because it's gone too far. No, I said softly. It's finally far enough. She's terrified, Nat. She hasn't slept. You've made your point. Just stop. Tell her to do the right thing I said. Then I will. He didn't answer, but the silence said enough. When the call ended, I watched the city lights flicker below each one like a tiny truth breaking through. For the first time, Diane Caldwell Pierce was cornered, and the woman she'd underestimated was writing the terms. The morning of the emergency board meeting, the air outside Pierce Medical's headquarters was heavy with humidity and tension. The news vans were already there, reporters stationed on the sidewalks waiting for a statement that would either save or end a dynasty. Inside the boardroom that once smelled faintly of power and polish now reeked of fear. I walked in beside Marcus Holt, our steps measured and deliberate. Conversations halted. Diane was already seated at the head of the table, though she looked smaller now, her power suit immaculate but her confidence threadbare. Jonathan sat 2 seats away, pale, drawn, his tie loosened as if even he had surrendered to inevitability. You don't belong here, Diane said the moment she saw me. Her voice cracked just slightly. This is a private meeting. Actually, Marcus said, setting down his leather briefcase, this is the perfect place for my client. You see, this meeting concerns her intellectual property, her patents, and her company's future. The board members exchanged wary glances. The chairman, a quiet man named Dr. Fields, finally spoke. Mrs. Caldwell Pierce, the allegations in the press are serious. We need full transparency. Did the company's right to the R-Series expire? Diane forced a brittle smile. Of course not. This is all a misunderstanding. Then you won't mind if we review the contracts, I interrupted, pulling out a file from my folder and sliding it across the table. Marcus handed another copy to Dr. Fields. This, he said, is the original licensing agreement between Dr. Pierce and Pierce Medical Systems. Note Section 3, Clause 4, renewal by written consent only. You'll see there are no renewal signatures for the last 2 years. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. One of the board members flipped through the pages, frowning. Is this true, Diane? Of course not, she snapped. This is sabotage. She must have fabricated. Marcus leaned forward. You're alleging document falsification, because if so, we'll be happy to invite the federal investigators who are currently reviewing your financial disclosures. Her face drained of color. Jonathan looked at me, then at his mother, and something inside him shifted. She's not lying, he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I saw the emails, the renewal reminders that went unanswered. Mom, you ignored them. Jonathan, don't you dare. You did this, he said, voice trembling but steady. You wanted total control, even if it meant destroying everything Dad built. I built this company. Diane's voice rose brittle and desperate. Without me, you'd all still be nobodies. I stood calm and unflinching. Without you, Diane, this company might still have its integrity. Marcus opened another folder. For the record, we also have communications between Mrs. Caldwell Pierce and Ms. Victoria Hale discussing plans to remove Dr. Pierce and reassign her patents under corporate ownership. That constitutes attempted intellectual property theft. The chairman's expression hardened. Is that true? Diane? She looked around the room, realizing there was no one left to defend her. Victoria sat, frozen eyes wide with panic. You were supposed to handle this, Diane hissed at her. You were supposed to fix it. I just did what you told me, Victoria stammered. The chairman rose, voice solemn. Mrs. Caldwell Pierce, based on this evidence, the board has lost confidence in your leadership. Effective immediately, we are voting on your removal as CEO. Diane turned to Jonathan, pleading, You can't let them do this. Jonathan, please. He didn't look at her. You made this inevitable, he said softly. The vote was swift, unanimous. Diane Caldwell Pierce was no longer CEO of Pierce Medical. The room fell silent as she stood shaking, gathering her papers with trembling hands. You think this is over? She whispered. You'll regret crossing me. Maybe I said, but I'd rather regret standing up than spend another day crawling. She glared at me one last time, then stormed out, the sound of her heels fading into memory. Marcus turned to the board. Dr. Pierce has proposed a partnership with Thompson Medical, ensuring the company's survival while preserving her intellectual property. I suggest you take it. The chairman nodded, approved. I felt the breath leave my chest, steady and complete. Justice wasn't loud, it was exact. The woman who once silenced me was gone. And for the first time in years, the company finally felt like it belonged to the truth. The fallout hit like a storm that refused to end. Within 48 hours of Diane's removal, Pierce Medical's press office issued a statement confirming the leadership change and acknowledging administrative errors in its handling of intellectual property. But the markets didn't forgive that easily. The company's stock dropped nearly 30% before stabilizing under emergency restructuring. Thompson Medical's partnership offer was finalized within the week, giving me board oversight and a controlling stake in the R-Series production line. What Diane had tried to erase was now under my name again, legally, publicly, permanently. The victory should have felt sweeter, but it came with its own kind of ache. Every news outlet ran the same headline, Pierce Dynasty collapses after patent scandal. Beneath the chaos, I felt a strange quiet settle over my life. For the first time in years, I didn't wake to a flood of board memos or urgent calls. My new office at Thompson Medical overlooked the Chattahoochee River, the skyline stretching out like a horizon reclaimed. Some evenings I stayed late just to listen to the hum of the lab, the sound that had once defined who I was before marriage, before Diane. One night, as the last of the lab lights dimmed, Marcus appeared in my doorway. You did it, he said. They've accepted every condition. Diane signed the formal resignation. It's over. I nodded, staring at the framed patents on my wall. No, I said quietly. It's finally beginning. He smiled faintly. You don't plan to forgive her, do you? I took a slow breath. Forgiveness isn't the right word. I plan to remember, but I'm not carrying her anymore. 2 days later, the call came anyway. I almost didn't answer when I saw the name flash across my phone, Jonathan. I let it ring twice before picking up. His voice was softer than I remembered. She's not well, Nat. The stress, the investigation, it broke something in her. She's been staying at the house alone. She asked me to call you. I closed my eyes. Why? She wants to see you. One conversation. She said she owes you that much. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe closure required confrontation. Maybe some wars don't end until you face the wreckage yourself. The next evening, I drove to the Caldwell estate, the same house where we'd toasted our first contract, where I'd once believed family meant protection. Diane was waiting in the sitting room, her power suits replaced by a simple cardigan. For the first time, she looked her age. You came, she said quietly. I didn't think you would. You asked, I replied, taking the seat opposite her. I wanted to say, she began, her voice breaking, I was wrong. About you. About everything. She struggled for breath. Pride, fighting apology. When my husband died, all I had left was this company. It was supposed to keep his name alive. When you started to shine brighter than that name, I panicked. I thought I was losing him all over again. The confession landed heavier than I expected. I watched her hands tremble. So you tried to erase me, I said softly, because you couldn't control me. She nodded slowly. I thought control meant love. I was wrong. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking between us. Then I said, You destroyed more than you protected Diane. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came because I wanted to know if you understood the cost." She looked up, tears glinting. "I do." I stood, smoothing my jacket. "Then that's enough." "You're forgiving me," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "I'm just done hating you." She closed her eyes as if the words themselves were mercy. When I left the estate, the air outside felt lighter, almost cleansing. Marcus called later that night. "How did it go?" She apologized, I said. "That's something." "Do you believe her?" he asked. I looked out over the city lights. Belief doesn't matter. I believe in my future now. That night I finally slept. 6 months later, the city skyline looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I stood in the corner office of Thompson Medical's new research division, my division watching the morning light spill across the glass walls. The hum of machines in the lab below was steady and alive, the same rhythm that had carried me through every failure, every betrayal, every quiet night I refused to quit. The wall behind my desk was lined with framed patents, each stamped with one name, Dr. Natalie Pierce. The name that once vanished from press releases was now engraved on every product that left our manufacturing floor. Reporters called it a redemption arc. I called it justice. The partnership between Thompson Medical and Pierce Medical had stabilized both companies, though not without scars. Diane had retreated from public life, her resignation letter leaked within days of signing. She moved out of Atlanta soon after leaving Jonathan behind to manage the remnants of their family's reputation. For months, he'd sent quiet updates, progress reports, reconciliations with the board, plans to rebuild trust. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to rebuild between us. Until one afternoon, an envelope arrived at my office addressed in Jonathan's handwriting. Inside was a single page and a small velvet box. The note read, "For what it's worth, I never stopped believing in what you built. I just wasn't brave enough to stand beside you when it mattered. I'm sorry. Jay." I opened the box. Inside was the miniature robotic arm, the first prototype we'd ever made together, the one I thought had been lost during the office purge. For a moment, I just stared at it, the polished steel glinting under the light. Then I placed it on my desk beside a photograph of the early team, back when everything had been simple and untainted. Some endings didn't need words. Weeks later, Thompson Medical hosted its annual innovation conference. I took the stage before hundreds of engineers, investors, and students, many of them women who had followed the story that once humiliated me. For years, I believed silence was strength, that staying composed meant staying safe. But silence can also become a cage built by other people's comfort. When I stopped being quiet, I didn't lose control. I reclaimed it. The audience was silent, every face turned toward me. Innovation isn't about ego or power. It's about integrity, the kind that doesn't fold when someone else tries to rewrite your worth. I paused, scanning the crowd, and to every woman who's ever been told she's too emotional, too ambitious, too much, let them talk. Just make sure your work speaks louder. The applause rose like a wave, steady and sincere. Marcus stood near the front row, nodding a faint smile of pride, tugging at his mouth. When I stepped off stage, he handed me a folder. "Your next venture proposal," he said. "Independent R&D firm, full control global patent authority. Investors are already interested." I laughed softly. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Neither do you," he said. "You've earned the future, Natalie. Take it." That night, as I stood on the terrace of my apartment overlooking the river, I thought about everything that had led me here, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the courtroom strategies whispered over coffee. It hadn't just been revenge. It had been reclamation. Diane had once told me that business was about power. She was wrong. It was about ownership of your work, your voice, your boundaries, your story. I picked up my pen and signed the final page of the proposal Marcus had given me. Pierce Dynamics, a name reborn. The kind of company I had always dreamed of building, one that innovated without exploitation, that gave credit where it was earned. Tomorrow, the papers would be filed. Tonight, I allowed myself to breathe. As the city lights shimmered across the water, I whispered, You forgot who built it, Diane. But I never did. My phone buzzed a message from a young engineer I'd mentored, Dr. Pierce. You inspired me to start my own lab. Thank you for showing that intelligence wins. I smiled, replying simply, keep building. The world remembers those who do. In the end, victory wasn't loud or cruel. It was quiet, deliberate, and undeniable, just like the woman who had built it all from the ground up.